So welcome, Barracuda fans and season ticket holders. We appreciate your support throughout this season. And of course, we're all going through these unprecedented times. We're going through it together. And with the news of the American Hockey League officially canceling the season, we figured this was an appropriate time to be joined by the general manager of the San Jose Barracuda, Joe. Well, Joe, first of all, how are you hanging in there? And what's going on right now in terms of quarantine lifestyle?
Well, we're doing well here. Everybody's healthy. It's most important, and just a lot of communication with Doug and Doug Jr., Tim Burke, the Barracuda staff, development staff, scouts, everybody else. Not only kind of wrapping up, the games from this year and talking about things, but getting ready for next year, potentially for the draft, for player signings. As you see, we've been in that market. So it's pretty much the same things we would do this time of year anyway, minus the games and the travel.
Yeah, it is. It's certainly unique, that just the adjustment that's going into our current situation and what's become somewhat normal life. But it's good to see you over a Zoom call here, because I know we've spoken over the phone a little bit, and we've caught up on some other Zoom calls. But it's nice to put a face to a voice and catch up here, and hopefully we can provide some insight for some fans who do have some questions as we go into an off season and a little bit of an unknown off season, and just some stuff in the air. So without further ado, we'll jump into it. With the season now officially canceled due to the COVID-19 pandemic, how do you assess overall the season that just transpired and came to its conclusion?
I think it had mixed results, because it, from the aspect of winning games and where we were in the standings and our start, that wasn't good enough. I think we all know that. It was a pretty interesting year. We'd have some pretty dominant games to where, we would see some of the young skill kind of clicking and getting some things done. But, we weren't real defensively sound for about the first half of the year, and it paid off, and it showed. And we didn't really adjust that till the second half of the year. As far as the team goes, in the second half of the year, really in the last quarter, we finished our last game with a 7-4 decisive win over Stockton, a team, that's a little, older, grittier than us, that we were kind of having trouble with. And we kind of found a way to beat them, in the last game, which is a positive thing. We ended up, basically getting points in all of our last 6 games, and in 11 of our last 13 games. So, that's about a quarter of the season that we played. And so in that aspect, we kind of trended up towards the end. Wasn't quite enough, in the end there with the standings and such, to kind of overcome what we did in the beginning, but you'd much rather be trending up. And then the other part would be with player development and promotion to the NHL. We had 16 players that played for both the CUDA and the Sharks this year, which we're very proud of, very earned promotions to the NHL. And, I think our fans who see the Barracuda night in and night out, they've seen the best in a lot of these players. And I think they were proud to see them, promoted to the NHL and get that experience. And it's just going to make for, these players, that experience is so valuable for them for next year and trying to make the NHL club, or perhaps even coming back to the AHL. You're going to see different players.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, too. You talk about all the recalls, 16 players that play both in the AHL and in the NHL within your organization. Just a tremendous number, really, if you think about it. But there was a lot that went down this past year. There was a lot of adversity the team dealt with as well. You had coaching changes at the NHL, which affected your American League team, with Roy Sommer going up, and then your development coaches joining the NHL group as well. And then, of course, Jimmy Bono and Michael Chason taking over bigger roles as co-coaches. So there was a lot that went down. And plus, out on top of that, you had the youngest team in the AHL a season ago. How do you hope that those lessons learned from all the adversity that transpired last year, how do you hope those lessons that were learned can be used down the line for your young prospects?
Well, I think, first and foremost is the adversity that the organization faced, really created opportunity for a lot of these players to grab spots and to seize opportunities. So that was very positive in that regard. And I think they look at, things that happened throughout the year, is that maybe that's going to be the impetus for their call up and such. the other thing about adversity, personal adversity and the things that are kind of going on, for our players, it's time for them. It allows them to kind of reflect on things and basically give them a base on things that they need to improve. I think a lot of our players find out, they're always the best players in junior hockey or college hockey or their leagues in Europe or such. And then they come to the American League, they find out how hard it is, game in and game out. And that type of adversity there that they go through, they might not be the fastest guy anymore, or the most skilled guy or such. And they're going to have to find other ways to basically survive in the game. And that's the reflection that they, take from that adversity.
You said in a conference call on Monday that the exit meetings that you had with some of your players after the season came to its end were some of the best that you've ever had. Why do you think that was? And if you don't mind, can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, quite frankly, it's, like what all of us are thinking about. You're thinking about nowadays some very serious subjects in this world. And I think a lot of times these young men, we have some players that are 19, 20, 21, 22. They haven't been through a lot of life moments like we're going through in the world right now. And I think a lot of them realize, how important hockey is to them, that, they're a pro hockey player. This is their career. There's some serious things going on in the world. So they're kind of more serious talks about their future. And, as we're probably having with our kids in different areas of life right now. And part of it too is that we took some time. The way the season ended, we didn't know what was going on. So we waited a little while for the exit interviews. Often our exit interviews are, they come in to see us in the office the day after we lose out in a tough series, a tough 5 or 7 game series in the playoffs. And they're still a little ticked off about that, and they're tired, and they don't have a real clear head or able to really reflect on the season. And just the timing of everything, the situation going on in the world, everything else, just made for some really serious talks. And we were able to, I think, with the tech platforms that we're all using with Zoom and WebEx and everything else now, that people are able to, they're more tech savvy with that. So our meetings were very collaborative. We had, multiple people on there talking, and I was just very pleased with them.
You had the youngest rosters we have mentioned, and you mentioned some of the young guys around 21 years of age. You're actually on average, under 23 years of age, which is just a tremendous number. But you had to have leadership roles filled by young guys who maybe if they were in different situations wouldn't quite have to step up into that situation just yet. But they did, and they did, I thought, pretty well. And they filled important roles for a group and guided your young players throughout the season. Is that what the organization covets, those type of men that can fill that role? And what type of characters are the organization looking for when you bring in a player within the Sharks org?
Well, I think as far as leadership goes, it's kind of a pay it forward culture that kind of has been established by Roy for a number of years. To establish mentorship, where he helped Bones and Chaser kind of in coaching. John McCarthy coming up, becoming an assistant coach, and everything he's provided throughout the years. You have Genny Nabaka, Brian Marchment, Mike Ricci, Dirk Graham, everybody around. It's a culture of teaching these young men how to be leaders. And then we had a next level that was pretty good with Trevor Carrick and Johnny Brodzinski and some of the guys who've been around for a few years. So that allowed and really encouraged the Jeff Yells and Manny Leaders and a number of our young players just to learn that this is the way we do things here. So they learn the right way, and you would see, it was nice to see Manny and Jeff, and there's a bunch of other leaders that we have as well, but those guys wear letters as young men and start to really show their leadership skills and their grit and things like that in the American League. And that's, we do look for players that can, mentor others. Character is a huge part of what our scouting staff looks for. And they've been very good at finding players in this regard, the Sharks organization. You don't get to the playoffs as many years as the Sharks have without having that type of ongoing, leadership and setting of high standards by players, in the locker room and with Barracuda for the past 5 years. So it's just an ongoing culture that we try and maintain.
Doug Wilson Jr., he spoke about your prospects reaching the 150 games mark or going into their third season before they really join the recall discussion. I think you can look at Alexander True as a perfect example of that. He reached his third year before he finally got his first recall. Why is the 150 mark or entering that third season or completing 2 full seasons in the AHL kind of that sweet spot for some of your prospects?
Yeah, it's more for experience than anything else. And if you're a high pick or a really highly offensive guy that can go and contribute right away in the NHL, that's a whole different animal. You go up and the NHL needs you to contribute. You kind of learn more on the fly there. But barring that, the entree for most of the players, and Alex True is a great example, is to be extremely responsible and reliable when you get to the NHL. There's not a lot of time to learn that there. Those wins and losses are much different than the American League. So Alex could take 2 years to kind of learn that. That's hard. You're coming in against more savvy players at the start of your career. You're getting burned. You're learning big lessons at times, and the AHL is a much better level to do that at. Often it takes a couple of years. The AHL has a lot of chaos to it. There's players coming and going all the time for recalls and such. There's players at different ages. All the teams kind of have a different philosophy of the way they play and such. So it's really a chaotic league. So if you can go through, learn your craft in this league with everything going on, you're going to be more than ready for the NHL. And that 150 games is a point to where you're, at that point that's kind of a norm, and at that point you're ready to come up. Hopefully within those 150 games you get a couple of recalls here or there, and like with Alex this year, getting that recall at the end was very valuable to him. So he's got that to take for experience for next year and competing for the NHL, along with all the 2 full years of AHL experience, and he's going to be ready.
You talked about the 150 mark going into your third season. Well, some of the largest growth can be found for players going into their second year of pro. You had more than 10 rookies on your roster at various points this past season, and now they're looking to make that big leap in a year or two, just like a Maxim Latunov did or a Jaden Holbrook a season ago. Going into this offseason, going into next year, how can these young players make that type of leap?
The AHL is such a difficult league to gauge from the outside. For players, it really is. When they come to our development camps in the summer and everything else, so they learn a lot about the organization. Players like Max, for instance, but then they come to that first year of the AHL and they go, "Wow, this is really hard. This isn't quite like what I went through at UConn." And a lot of times it's harder to correct things during the year to kind of make those jumps because, and a lot of times it comes from the reflection you have in the summer of having gone through some things and go like, wow, I need to fix this, and this. I need to improve here, here, and here. And that's kind of what Max went through. He was one of the best exit interviews we had the year prior. Took everything to heart, worked on some physio issues worked on some of his play and some of the suggestions he got from our development staff, and came back a much different player. That's because he had the summer to reflect, and he went and did something about it and came back the next year. And that's usually the norm in the league. The first year is a tough year for the majority of players in the AHL. The players, having a lot of success in that first year, yet you have to gauge it. But you'll see steps between years, between the first and second year and between the second and third year. We expect that from all of our guys because, they were given the opportunity. Our guys were given a lot of games, given a lot of ice time, given recalls and everything else. We weren't like a vet-loaded team to where our young guys, didn't get the ice time or had to play down and roles. Our guys were kind of pushed right into it.
I think that's why I'm so excited about what this team could be next year, because you do have so many guys going into year 2 and the experience gained in that first year, I think as we've seen in years past, it can play a huge role in them making a big leap. Over the last week, Joe, the organization has signed 5 different players to contracts, and several of the top prospects within the organization are expected to join either the Sharks or the Barracuda as early as next year. Can you tell us a little bit about that prospect pool that could be joining your group as early as next season?
Yeah, we're very excited, and the thing about players joining the Sharks, I mean, it's what we do each year. Join the Sharks and Barracuda organization. It's what we do each year, really, to increase our internal competition. So, as much as the players coming back are going to make improvements, they're going to have to, because it's a pretty good crop of players coming in. And I never apologize for internal competition, because that's what really drives the whole organization to be better. More players, you have to fight for your role on the team. You have to fight for your ice time, and then that pushes all the way up into the Sharks. So, having players come in, the crew that we just brought in right now, Melnichuk, he's a really sought after player. I know a lot of our fans read some of the prospect blogs and such out there. There are a number of NHL teams that were kind of coveting him and going after him, and we're very fortunate that he selected us to come and play for us. At 21 years old, he's one of the best goaltending prospects in Europe, had some great numbers in the KHL in St. Petersburg, and we're just really anxious for him. And we actually, Navi and Tim Burke and I just talked to him this morning. His English has come along really well. He went outside for a little bit better reception, and he was laughing and joking with us a little bit in English. And I think Navi only had to translate a few things with him. And so we're just really happy to talk with him. Handemark, we talked to actually yesterday as well, and just to kind of follow up with them, same group. And Doug Jr. jumped on that call as well. And it was, just talking with him. He's 26. He's really got it done in the Swedish league. He's going to come in pretty ready to play, like a Shellman or a Melker or guys like that we've had throughout the years, Sorensens and such, that they come over. They're real close. They're kind of, they might need the AHL for a little bit, but they don't need to learn a lot in the AHL, and then they're knocking at the door of the NHL. Handemark kind of fits that profile. It's up to him to come in. He's huge. He's 6'4", I think 220 plus. So big centerman. So which is nice to have, defensively sound guy. Ibrahimov is going to be interesting. He's 19, so much like a lot of our players in that 18-19 age group, there's options of all kinds of options there, including maybe even just playing another year in Europe. But we wanted to get him signed now so we can integrate him more into our camps and such. So I'm not so sure about the American League, but it's a possibility. But Europe also is. Joey Garefa, he's an electric guy. He's kind of like some of the smaller dynamic guys they have in Stockton, I guess. Or you could say Helga walks with us, or if you go to Stockton, you have Mangiapane, Phil Phillips, guys like that. Just really, he's fast. They call him Mighty Mouse a little bit, because he's strong. He kind of overworks. He's just always hunting pucks and everything else, and he's pretty electric with it. When he gets a puck, he can score. And I know our guys were talking about being excited about thinking about him and Merkley on a power play together, and so kind of flashy, dynamic guy. Kyle Topping, a cerebral guy, who's a bit like Rourke Chartier was. Ironically, played for the St. Kelowna team. We had him at camp a few years ago, so he's kind of a heady, responsible guy, good centerman, but he also can create. So, it's a good crop. And then you add that to John Leonard and Pasachuk, who we talked about earlier, who we think are really kind of on the verge of the NHL as well. They have a few things to work on, obviously as young men, but they're very important guys. And then the players like Gallant and Kotkov and Jake McGrew and such that were players that we sent back to junior next year, and Jonathan Dahlin as well in Europe. That's a crop of players that we didn't have with Barracuda this year that will be pushing for jobs and pushing the other guys to compete even harder. That internal competition will trickle up.
And hearing that Melnichuk's English is improving is music to my ears. I'm sure it's music to the rest of the Sharks broadcasting staff as well. We're excited to have all these guys. I mean, it's a good crop of young players that we've seen, over the last couple of years. We've heard about them, and now we'll get an opportunity to potentially see them as early as next season. Time will tell on the NHL draft, when it will take place, where it will take place, but you do have 3 picks within the top 60. How do you hope to add to the current prospect pool that's already in place?
Well, 3 in the top 60 is pretty remarkable, given that we didn't have that, in the spring here. And so just moving a few players and gathering some picks has really stocked the cupboards of picks. And, it gives the organization flexibility. First of all, this draft is pretty deep. It's deep so that at minimum, the first couple of picks are going to get into a level that at times we think is kind of mid-first type players. So we're kind of excited with that, of the quality of player we believe will be available for those picks. And we think it'll be strong, with that 3rd pick as well. And 3 in the top 60, again, that's a strong start to the draft. So we feel we're going to be able to add some players to make us deeper. Should we use them? We moved up, we moved down at times, and used those picks to do that. We've also used our picks to acquire players. If the draft gets moved up, it's going to be interesting to see how that all works out with acquiring players. But again, picks are assets, and we have 3 pretty good assets right now.
Yeah, excited about who you guys will be adding and when that will be. Continuing on here, John McCarthy, he joined your coaching staff last year with the Barracuda, of course, following a health scare. He's 100%, but he elected to call it a career, no longer continuing to play, and instead kind of joining the second side of his career now on the coaching side of things. If you don't mind just speaking on John and the impact that he has had on so many prospects in the history of your organization.
Well, you know what? I have 30 years with the Sharks. We've never had a player or person like John, that's dedicated himself just to being just setting standards in our development system for many years. People forget too, he had 88 games with the Sharks, so he had a significant number of games with the Sharks and over 500 in the American League. He set standards that will. Hopefully we can keep going for a long time. Again, you don't run across people like John very many times in your career at all. A very, very special guy. He's going to have a long legacy, and I'm really glad that it's worked out that he remains working in the organization. And this year was great that he was able to, once he healed, it was pretty quick heal of that serious medical event for him, and he was able to go right behind the bench and really contribute. And again, that was part of stabilizing after we had within a couple months time, we had Roy and Reach and Abby go straight up to the Sharks, and we had Johnny Mac's medical situation, and we had then had him go in and work with Bones and Chaser, and ended the year on a pretty good note. So we're just proud of John and fortunate to have him.
I will never forget when he told the team that he was going to retire, but then only moments later when he said he was going to join the coaching staff, how the entire room erupted and how those frowns turned upside down. Every guy was extremely excited that he would be sticking around and join the coaching staff. One last question for you, Joe, before I let you go. While we're still a couple years away, how excited are you about the prospect of the Barracuda having their own facility, and what benefits might that bring to the organization?
Oh, I can't wait. I mean, it's going to be right at our training center there, so right connected. So just that continuity of having everything just in one building. It's scaled for minor league hockey size-wise, so some of the things we're going to be able to do for the fans and from that aspect, it's going to be really exciting. Our dates that we'll get, our nights and times, things like that will be the primary tenant, unlike with SAP, which is huge, and there's the Sharks and concerts and such. It's a busy building, so at times, we do the best we can with our times, but with Barracuda, it's going to be, more set times and such. And it's going to be great for hockey in general because the whole project is adding a couple of rinks to we already have 4 rinks, and it'll have a total of 6. Youth hockey and other ice sports are just growing like crazy in the Bay Area. So quite frankly, we need the rinks, we need the ice. They're going to be used. They're going to really help grassroots hockey, which helps Barracuda and Sharks in the end. We couldn't be happier for this project and some of the other auxiliary things that we may have in that building, like rookie tournaments and things like that.
Yeah, it's almost like living with your parents growing up. Eventually, you've got to move out, right? You've got to get your own place. Although you love your parents, you love your house, you've got to get your own place, and that's going to be a situation for the Barracuda in a couple of years. Joe, we can't thank you enough. I do want to leave you with this one last final note, if you don't mind. The support of the fans really throughout the year, and everybody was in limbo for the last couple of months, seeing if the season will continue. And in the end, they elected to cancel the remainder of the season in the playoffs. But we had a lot of support throughout the year. If you don't mind, just give them some final thoughts to everybody who bought tickets, and most notably to our season ticket holders.
Well, I just want to thank you for your support. We have such a great group of fans. So just love the Barracuda, have a great time at the games. Love our players, are highly intelligent. They know so many players come up and ask questions all the time on their favorite prospects and what's happening with them. Some of the things I'm talking about today, quite frankly, most of our fans know as well as we do, Nick. They just keep in touch with what's happening with all of our prospects, and I can't say enough about it. It's unfortunate it kind of ended how it is, but I can't wait to start up again next year. And I'd like to thank everybody.
Yeah, perfectly said. I would like to thank everybody as well. I think Joe's speaking for the entire organization. We can't say thank you enough for your continued and unwavering support. Joe, thank you for the time. We certainly appreciate it. Great catching up. Stay safe, and hopefully we'll talk to you very soon.
Sounds good. Stay safe, Nick. Take care.
For Joe, I'm Nick. Thanks for watching.